Welcome to the Milford School Committee meeting of January 17th. The first item, the media is present at this meeting. This meeting is being recorded. Anyone who wishes to make a video or audio recording of this meeting should please contact the superintendent or a member of the committee. The first item on our agenda is the approval of minutes. We have one set of minutes to approve, and then we have a set of executive session minutes that will be released to the public after tonight. And the meetings to be approved were for the regular and executive session of January 3rd, 2013. Each member here was present at both, so we can take them as a single motion. Has everyone read the minutes and had an opportunity to, and everybody's okay with them? So I'll take a motion from Scott, a second from Don. All in favor? Opposed? Unanimous of the members who are here in favor, and so the motion will carry. Again, there's no vote required on the release of the executive session minutes from September 6th, 2012. The next item on our agenda is our announcements, correspondence, and distributions. Did anyone have announcements, correspondence, or distributions? I've one. Some of you may have noticed recently that the video and audio quality of these broadcasts have improved, and that's been the direct result of our association with Milford TV. They have just opened a brand new studio off on, I don't know the address. What's the address?
138 South.
138 South Main Street. They've opened up a brand new studio on 138 South Main Street. I have been down there. I've seen the facility. It's a beautiful facility. They want everyone in our community to take advantage of it, especially our students. So there is going to be a grand opening on January 19th from 2 to 7 p.m. Milford TV invites anyone to come down and to attend the grand opening. They're looking to form connections with the school. They would like to have internships available for students. They certainly welcome parents' interests to come down and speak with them. And so anyone who has an opportunity on January 19th from 2 to 7 p.m. to stop by and see the studios, I was impressed, and I'm sure you'll be impressed if you go down as well.
I don't. I want to just welcome our student representatives this evening. We haven't had some students in some time, so Mr. Tempesta, thank you for making that arrangement. Better mid-year than never, right? So at least they're here to join us, so welcome. Will you be regular attendees, or we're going to rotate? It's different every week. Yeah, unless you really like it tonight, then. Yeah, okay.
So the next item on our agenda is the invitation to speak. Has anyone come tonight to address the committee? I don't see anyone, so the next item on our agenda will be the Milford High School Program of Studies, and Mr. Tempesta has joined us tonight, and I would invite him to come forward.
I'm sorry. I was going to ask if Kathy and Ron were coming as well tonight, or?
They were, but they had prior engagements.
Okay.
Yes.
So I know that everyone has been distributed a rather lengthy document that has the program of studies, and we also have a cheat sheet that explains what some of the changes and differences are. So Mike, I'll turn the floor over to you and
Sure.
let you lead us away.
All right, so basically most of the changes for next year, there are very few changes, but the changes that we have are adjustments for moving forward with the new schedule, some of those adjustments, and also some of those adjustments, we have some new courses that are offered that have been in the works for a while. One of those courses is an Italian exchange course to go along with the very rich trips that we have to Italy and Spain. And we're working on developing the French trip as well, and when that comes along, we would offer this. And again, all of these new courses, I want to point out, are subject to enrollment, as all courses are. So we costed them out when the teachers came forward to their CTLs with ideas. We told them we would put these in, obviously pending enrollment and pending if we had the space and the schedule to do that. So let me preface that. We had a few other courses as well, most notably in the PE department. So we have our traditional courses historically for, I want to say, 5 or 10 years now. We've really only had 2 courses in there, basically PE for grades 9 through 10 and PE for 11 through 12. And in addition to those offerings, they have other electives, one most notably presented by Mr. Chapman, chaplain, excuse me, is Red Cross certification, and you know, so basically, you could get certified in courses, also learn to save a life and others. And there's also some fitness classes, a dance class that has been long requested, pending enrollment, and a few other electives. Cooperative music class as well. Okay, that cooperative music class is parallel to the cooperative art class, where our students work with bistro students and offer them services and in terms of art instruction, and it's just a great arrangement that we have, very strong relationship with that program, so we're excited about the courses. It's a highlight, quick list.
Mike, thank you again. Certainly a very, and I realize you were just reviewing the highlights, and
Sure.
thank you for that. Question for you. So fundamentally, I really like the idea of the additional classes that are being offered. I think it's always good when we can offer additional programs for our students.
Sure.
What, if any, additional costs, and I realize that they were budgeted out and already
Yeah.
planned in, what, if any, additional costs should we expect to see as a result of these classes?
So far, no additional costs. All of them were with the parameters of what's already budgeted for supplies and books. Particularly the new course, and again, they're pending subscription. So even the course, there's a new history course too, half-year elective course, it's a meld. I'm sorry, I don't know the Contemporary American History course. It's a meld of current events in history. Most of that is online, not a big textbook cost and things like that. And I certainly made that clear to everyone as they came in what the you know, the plan would be for that. That basically, particularly with some of the costs associated with new textbook series going to the full year that we're already looking at that have been budgeted, this is not the year for other things. We want to make sure that we can afford our core first, and that was a parameter given at the beginning. Yeah.
The CPR cost, is that something that, is there any type of certification cost that goes on with that with the students?
I
That the
think-
students would have to, that we're burdening students with, or is it something that is there a grant through the Red Cross and just not sure how
My
that's
understanding
covered?
is that there is grant money for that, but I can't say, you know, definitively that wouldn't be without a cost. I think I can come back and get an answer for that. I don't know
Okay.
right now. Yeah.
I would appreciate that, just as we're out talking with parents, and obviously,
Yeah.
as we're heading into budget time, any costs would certainly be appreciative as far as knowing kind of what that looks like, as well as if we're asking for students for any money for any reason.
Sure.
That's it. Thank you.
Yes, sure.
Couple things. These new courses are really directed towards juniors and seniors to balance out their schedule, because this will be a really new schedule for them, correct?
Yes.
And so it gives them more opportunity to balance out their schedule with alternatives that kind of transitions.
It
in their
will.
schedule.
It will. Yeah.
So I wanted to make that clear, and they're not all like, they're not a core. You wouldn't take a core of Red Cross. It's a balance of the
No.
way the semesters work and the
Yeah.
days work.
So, yeah, that's
So
very accurate.
Yeah, because the juniors and seniors have been under a block schedule, and so their course
Yeah.
of study over the 4 years is a little bit different than, say, an incoming freshman or upcoming sophomores.
Absolutely.
My question, though, is I'm always impressed with the breadth of courses that we offer our students. I think it's really impressive, and I think the public should know how impressive that is. It's not just, you know, your standards. There's a lot that students can access here if they're guided right. Which brings me to my next question, guidance. Do we have a plan in the course of studies? We don't have a director of guidance yet, or,
No.
you know, I'm just, I get a lot of questions, and it's so important to high schoolers to have that
Sure.
director. Do we have a plan in place for that? Is
We
that
do. We
ongoing?
do.
Like, where is that going right now? Because we have guidance counselors.
We have guidance counselors, and we have a shared interim
Position.
position,
Mhm,
where
right.
the interims are actually incredibly experienced, and they've been very well received and helpful, particularly with a schedule change and adoption
Yep.
and editing some of these documents. And so we do have something in place. The posting just closed today, and we
Okay.
do have applications for that.
Great.
We felt, and we only have 3 applicants for that position.
Okay.
And it's kind of what we expected. We didn't get many applicants at the end, over the summer. And we know that pool, the best candidate pool will be in the spring, and we wanted to target that.
Okay.
To your point, we didn't want to let it go to the spring. We still
Right.
wanted to try at the beginning of the year, and we only have 3. And we will be contacting them.
Okay.
But we're working on it.
Right.
But in terms of the actual scheduling of the students and the support for the students,
Right.
the director didn't have a student load in the past. So the students themselves have not missed, and we do have very experienced counselors. And we do meet with them regularly, weekly, and we follow up, particularly when we go through this process. So it's that in terms of planning and the overall leadership of the guidance department, we need that position. We do. I can't stress that enough. But most likely, we will probably wait until March for another posting when people are coming out of programs.
Okay.
All right, so, and we've worked on that, on the posting and the job description, frankly, as an administrative team and with the interim folks
Okay.
who have years of experience, and frankly, too, that you mentioned it, their experience in very competitive area schools, Hopkinton, Bellingham, Hopedale, all with year-long schedules. Okay, so that migration that we're going towards to that is their perspective has been very helpful.
So when do the students look at these courses and select with their guidance counselor
Yeah,
and parents
well,
these
so we're going to
courses?
start, just took finals. We're starting up
Yep.
next term. We have targeted the first week of February to, we need to finalize, we're finalizing our documents, basically our FAQ sheet for not only the program of studies and what we're offering and how we're offering it, but what it means to go to the new schedule.
Yes.
Okay, and every aspect of that. So the freshmen coming in the class of 2017, their graduation requirements, the numbers of the courses, because the new courses will meet for six times. We're just going with the same ratio for meeting and time-based predicated on Carnegie units. So, but they will now meet for 6. The graduation requirements that I highlighted in your packets, the ratios haven't changed that much, but those new numbers are there also for the required biology lab now that we have that will meet 7 times. So
I thought that was clear in your manual. I'm just wondering, kids aren't going to read it. They're high school kids. So how are you going to introduce this whole new schedule to them?
We put everything online, and we're going to repeat what we did the last 2 years. We're going to go to Middle School East for the freshmen for their own day and presentation. Then we're going to have a parent night just for incoming freshmen, as we did. And then we also have a parent night for grades 9, 10, and 11
To
as
introduce the new schedule, or just for
to
course
introduce the
selection?
new, every question,
Okay.
not just the new schedule, just as we do every night for program of studies nights. Question, what would I want to take, we start with the general overview of that for about a half an hour, then it's question and answer with the audience, anything that they might want to ask. So, and our targeted dates on that, and I'm still trying to get those pinned down. We should have those shortly. We're looking at the 6th of February and potentially even the 30th for the freshman one, but I still don't have that confirmed yet.
Okay,
All right,
great.
so just a few weeks
I'm
out.
excited about this schedule.
And it's important to do that. We pushed those dates up so that we would have more tallies and we can start building the schedule
Right.
sooner. We still have to get everyone back, but we want to be very clear and precise in exactly what all those language, and there's still some things that we're waiting to resolve with that.
Okay, thank you.
To pick up on what you were just discussing with Christine, I too am very concerned, and I'm glad that we're making, obviously, an effort in the 8th grade to bring those students up. And those students are certainly a concern. Of course, I'm more concerned about students that have been existing in the current scheduling process, and I guess I don't want to say worried, because I have a lot of confidence in the staff here, but I'm concerned that it is going to be a transition that is going to need to be managed, and that we're going to need all hands on deck. And so I'm wondering, what types of problems are you anticipating that you're prepared to deal with if there are some challenges that pop up, students not understanding how they should be picking their courses, or how is that?
Sure. In terms of challenges with that, I anticipate very few challenges with the students who are already in the building picking the courses. Really, nothing has changed. So a year-long course where it was, it was just half a year before, but it's the same concept. The requirements are the same. There really isn't much of a difference, I don't think there'll be any issues on the student side. On the parent side, you're still selecting and getting pre-approval from the teachers and things like that for which level you should be in. And then basically the electives still meet the same way. So for example, a student who typically would take whether it's an elective like band or things like that's going to change very little for those different sets of kids. So I don't anticipate anything with that.
Have you built sort of or scripted a consistent message that you and your staff can use to communicate with a parent that's concerned who perhaps has a student that's been here for 3 years and
Sure.
are accustomed to a specific scheduling type, and now this new scheduling type is coming,
Yeah.
and so now there's calls coming in and they're concerned, and is there...
That document, that's exactly what I prefaced before with the FAQ sheet. So basically, we're gonna field test that on student council and other student constituents, but basically we want to say and put that in grid format, and I gave you a sample of that so far. It's still not complete, but particularly because the courses, the requirements, they're still going to meet the requirements going out because the new courses meet for 1 additional credit. It would be a difference if they met for less credits. So they're still going to meet the existing graduation requirements. There are a few areas where, in very few areas, where a student, we would need to make an exception for a student. And even then, whenever you change from year to year like that, you have to be sensitive to the students meeting the requirements of the year that was approved that they came in. So, and we already field tested that. I did that with the interims. It looks fine.
Because I would hope, if it was my process to manage, I would make sure that everyone who would be fielding a question from a concerned parent was consistent and had the same message.
Oh, sure.
And had a very sort of short, very direct way of explaining or sort of allaying fears and explaining how the process would work, so that concern is not going to be there. Because I think that this is seen as a pretty big change, and
Oh, it is.
you spoke of it as a pretty big change. We're all pretty excited about that change.
Yeah.
And so I'd hate to I'd hate to stumble because the messaging wasn't as strong as it could be.
And we're dying to get the word out. So, and we have been for a while. So, but your point taken. We will have that clear. It will not only be at the guidance counselor, administrative, and teacher levels. It will be published. Okay,
Yeah.
so everyone will know exactly how it goes, and
Yeah.
and that's what we're looking to finalize before that parents' night. So, and we also have a few unresolved things with labs and other things that we'll have ready for that.
That's great. That kind of consistency, I think, is going to go a long way towards easing this transition and making it much more simple, plain and clear.
Oh, yeah.
When a parent knows that the guidance counselor will have the same response as a teacher, as a vice principal, and the principal would, I think that's going to be, it's important that we have that message and we relay it in that manner so it's consistent across the board. So I'm very gratified that's going to occur.
Sure.
It's very important. Don?
Oh, Mike, I agree. I don't anticipate any problems. And as far as the only issues really for the kids is that they're changing, behavioral patterns are changing, right?
Yeah.
And, I have 3 boys in this high school, and I can honestly tell you there's not one that's pleased with this new schedule that's coming out, right?
Okay.
But they love this block schedule.
Yeah.
Which, if my kids love it, means it should change anyway. But anyway, the positives, though, that are gonna come out of this, in my opinion, are the attention span of the kids. The shorter classes are geared for the kids' attention span at this age. That's one of the things I think we should all be focused on and getting that message out. And I can honestly tell you, from the experience that I had a few years ago when I was a substitute teacher up here, and you realized within 60 minutes, these kids were basically shutting down and ready to move on to their next class. So I've seen it from both ends, and I just think it's going to be a great fit. And the real proof is going to be in the MCAS and all the scoring. So as we go into the new year, just seeing the benchmarks of the new schedule and the impact on the grades and the MCAS scores and everything else. One of the things regarding the MCAS is they're going to be going into this with it being fresh in their mind. The one thing that I've always been upset about is, a kid who finishes in December, January, whatever it is, well, now, right, so January, and all of a sudden they're going into an MCAS for biology in March or April. And, I have our oldest son, who extremely smart, he struggled with that. So I'm, the positive things for the parents, for them to realize are the attention span, the impact on the grades, everything else. I think it's great.
It will be a change. So students are going from fewer classes, okay, to having more classes. But that's also a misnomer where one perception was that, they would have 7 long classes, homework all on the same night, all these things. It's not going to be like that. It's going to be very parallel to what they came in with as 8th graders. So
That's my argument back to the kids.
Yeah.
They have, especially the ones that are in the AP classes.
Yeah.
Their homework load is huge. It's not an easy task by any means. So I think their fear is, I'm going to have more classes. How am I ever going to get this done? And I'm trying to explain to them, no, you have to understand they're going to be stretching that over, twice the length of time. And so it's for a parent just having that conversation with them, because there is some anxiety on their part, to your point, Pat. But again, it's just a change, and I'm sure within a couple of days they get used to the routine and it shouldn't be an issue. So.
yeah, we think so too, and we also think, and we understand, that change is tough, but the benefits, the 23 and a half more hours per course per year over 4 years, it's in each academic subject, it's staggering, the hours when you add it up. So in the continuity of that too, particularly in the traditional courses, building block courses of math, foreign language, okay, no gaps, as you mentioned before, in the current block schedule, a student can go a year, okay, without, from Algebra 1 to Algebra 2, or from Spanish 2 to Spanish 3. And that continuity is going to really be important for them. So we're excited about it.
Yeah, I would imagine it makes it a lot easier for a kid who's moving into our town.
It does.
They're used, their school's probably on a full year schedule, and all of a sudden it's much easier to plug them into the system and not leave them behind.
We've seen that with choice students too, who come in from a traditional year-long schedule, and they try to come in and they can't get out in time.
Right.
Sometimes, I think we have more to offer that way.
Yeah, that's good.
Mike, one of our concerns, a universal concern on most of the school committee, a couple of years ago, was that students don't have access to financial literacy coursework. And I know that we had developed a course, and it was one of those sort of tossing courses, sort of a filler piece. It was a couple of credits, great content. I'm not saying that it was a tossing insofar as, it wasn't valuable content. It's just it wasn't, it wasn't a full credit load. And I'm wondering, that's still continues to be extremely important to me. I think a lot of these students aren't going to get that anyplace else. And I'm wondering how we're doing with enrollment on those courses, and how we're going to transition that type of coursework into the new schedule, and how that'll fit into our new process. Because again, I think it's extremely important.
Yeah, right now they're being taught as seminars and math classes, and we envision that staying, particularly now that we have more time overall in the course for the math class. Another aspect too that you just reminded me of is that one thing we're not offering SAT and MCAS review classes anymore as electives, but we are taking those components and rolling them into all of our classes for all students. So it's a better safety catch that way. What we will look to, right now we don't have any definite plans, specific plans to expand the financial literacy piece, because frankly we've been too busy with the conversion. But now that we have the space, we can look at that. And in general, that was a common thread with the block, that we couldn't fit everything in. It's not that people didn't want to do more, and particularly in science, where in inquiry-based instruction, where in learning, where you want to experiment, you want to do those things, and then that's was the foundation of the block, to have a long block of time. But the reality is, they haven't been experimenting a lot in classes because they have to get through the coverage of the course. So we're going to remedy a lot of those things with this schedule.
So it's your opinion, movement away from the block is actually going to give us more opportunity to work with that
Oh,
financial literacy piece?
Absolutely, why we've been pursuing it so vigorously. And for that and other things, but also it's going to give more access as well. So as you mentioned, the AP courses or other courses for every end and every student's ability, they will now have more freedom to choose those. So a little bit less time in those as they go to traditional, just meeting all year. But those bridge courses, where a course really meant for 1.5 times, really, didn't allow the access that the new schedule will. So.
Just to pull on what Patrick was talking about as far as the financial literacy class, is the intent then, would the intent then with a class such as that be to turn that into a 1.5 credit type course and turn that and have it be part of that, rather than, sounds like right now you're doing it as sort of, it's a unit lesson almost, as part of a math, as part of some math classes?
Yeah, and then frankly, it was kind of there when I got here, type of thing.
Okay.
So that's what we've been doing.
Okay.
We don't have a plan to roll it into a formalized course right now. My concern with that would be, right now it's a graduation requirement. We know that it can run through the math courses so that everyone gets it.
Okay.
But maybe we could find a more formal home for that, okay? So that, and we would have to look at that over time to see where that could be. If we allow it to just be an elective, we may run into the same things like we did with the MCAS courses and things like that, so.
I think that's fair. I can, working in the financial services industry, I can tell you it is such an invaluable course for as many students as we can to help prepare them. We have an obligation to help prepare our students for life when they walk out the doors. And whether they're, 65 or 25, there's nothing more heartbreaking than having to explain to somebody how writing a check works, how balancing their bank account works, how using a credit card works. Yes, you have to pay this back, and I can't tell you the number of people that come back at 25, 35 and beyond that still don't understand that. So I think we have a great opportunity, to Patrick's point, of being able to help at least give some of that groundwork within their curriculum, and it sounds like we've got pieces of it. I will just, as an aside note, I think some of our local banks, we're looking to hopefully help aid with that. I can tell you that most banks actually have that course and all the coursework already in place.
Sure.
That they have volunteers that will come out and actually teach it.
Yeah.
So it's a good way to get some volunteers at no cost. So it's something that I would encourage you to partner with local partners as well.
Sure.
As you continue to look to expand that, whether you use their volunteer works or whether you use that just as an encompasses from a curriculum perspective.
Good. Thank you.
I actually read through this whole 105 pages, so I remember parts of it. And a personal finance seminar is required for graduation.
It is.
So there is an opportunity, not just in math class, where students have a day where they have a personal finance seminar
Yeah.
to go to, correct?
That's
So there's
right.
that kind of structure. So it could be expanded to be, once each part of the year. A whole course, I don't know.
Another-
I don't know how you teach that
Well-
over the course of a year or an every other day elective. I mean, it's necessary, but I don't know. I think that organized seminars 2-3 times a year might accomplish the same goal, especially if they're a graduation requirement.
Sure.
That's just my 2 cents on it.
There's a couple things we're working on in the school council in terms of proposals for graduation requirements. One is a community service requirement, and again, this is for next year. We're working on it this year. We're looking at models. The other was to investigate a series of workshops for the senior experience, so in lieu of taking your finals or other types of exams. So you would have real life seminars. You would meet with people from industry, from banking. and also a series of workshops to prepare for college or the world of work, okay? We're looking at that. That might be an easier spot to put it in. And I say this because we've batted around with the CTLs. We're trying to make decisions so that kids have the most choice, not straying from the requirements that have already been, adopted and things like that. But we want to make sure we have the delivery mechanism in terms of staffing, in terms of, there's a lot that goes into saying we can do this as a course, to your point. So
Yeah.
we need that other structure, and that might be the way to do it.
Well, I think it's important to have it as a universal requirement. There's certain requirements that, personal finance is absolutely should be a universal requirement. It's how we deliver it effectively to every student that needs to happen. And I just, you're pulled out for guidance seminars. I think
Yeah.
something similarly, a well-structured seminar could happen.
Yeah.
More than once a year. I think that, why I don't like the block schedule is its reinforcement over the course of the year is much more effective than one-shot wonder in 3 hours of a school day.
Yeah.
Yeah, Michael, when we were looking into this a few years ago, one of the things that we came up with, we were talking to Bob about it, was the virtual classroom that you had in there. And to Scott was saying too, not a lot of banks and financial institutions, as well as your credit card companies like Visa and American Express, offer the basics online. And it's really geared toward high school, let's say 7th and 8th grade. I still say the word junior high because I'm just aging. But anyway, 7th and 8th grade, as well as high school, to teach them the basics, like Scott was saying, check writing, balancing a checkbook, just learning the value of money. In the day of $125 sneakers, let the individual know, or the student know how much their parents have to work to buy those pair of sneakers. So just the value of money, the respect of money alone, I think would be, a great credit to that course. And again, does it have to be a whole course? I don't know. I haven't really, I don't remember how intense those online courses were, but they really covered a lot of the basics. And once you learn that, you actually came out of there feeling pretty confident that the student does know not only the value of money, but also how to balance a checkbook, how to probably read a stock section in the newspaper too, and understand what that means as well.
Great.
Mike, and the reason why I'm thinking of this is earlier in your presentation, you talked about possibly adding a dance class, based on enrollment and stuff like that.
Sure.
Which made me remember, I think it was, must have been in May, right before we, ended for the summer session. Bob had thought about possibly us starting to look into maybe adding some vocational type programs. I think Scott had mentioned one around services. I think with, how diverse Milford is, I actually thought that was a great idea. So I was just wondering have you put any thought into that? Has there been any research done into it, where it was brought up in May, and do we have any plans? You are, all right.
But Mike may have some thoughts.
Well, we did. As a result of that, with the fine arts, we've expanded that. We have expanded a food service too. We're looking at those things. We have looked at, and we want to make sure those swell, and also reaching out to Bob had the vision of that to all the hotels we have in the area. Can we get potentially a hotel restaurant program going? We still haven't, we have some internships going on with the pathways. We don't have that internship component. It's ripe, it's out there, but we haven't realized it yet.
Right.
No.
Okay.
So.
I'll speak to that a little bit more.
Okay, unless you have anything else to add, Mike, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike.
The next item on our agenda is the report of the superintendent of schools, and this is the mid-cycle goals and progress report. Bob?
Okay, thank you. What I thought we could do is really make this a discussion to some extent, and I'm going to just read for everybody step 3 and step 4 of the cycle, because as we recall, this is sort of our first impression of going through this document together. Just for the benefit of people who don't have this in front of them, and I know you don't have this committee doesn't have it, the document I'm referring to is the actual tool, the Massachusetts Model of System for Educator Evaluation. So step 3, just so we can kind of focus in on what this should be about tonight. Step 3 is the superintendent plan, implementation, and collection of evidence. And I'll just read the quick little blurb on that. The superintendent implements the superintendent's plan, the plan that being what we talked about when we approved earlier in the fall, with assistance from the committee as appropriate. School committee members and superintendent individually collect evidence on progress, on goals, and performance against the standards. And then I think part and parcel to that is step 4 of this cycle, which is the mid-cycle goals review, the topic of tonight. At a mid-cycle public meeting or series of meetings, the superintendent reports on progress being made on the goals in the superintendent's annual plan. The school committee reviews the report, offers feedback, and discusses progress and possible mid-cycle adjustments with the superintendent. So that's where we are tonight, and that's the purpose of this one. The last time we met, I showed you an example of what kind of evidence. I showed you the curriculum committee meeting agendas as an example of the kind of evidence that I was putting together. Certainly, members of the committee, you may have emails you've collected or things I've sent you. Just recently, for example, around professional development, you had an idea of what professional development day in Milford tomorrow. We have a full in-service day for our staff. Hopefully you have a picture of what that looks like, the courses being offered, and so forth. That's the sort of thing that I'm envisioning as evidence. If you have a different thought on evidence, I want to make sure sort of mid-cycle that I can readjust if you think I should be collecting more of this, more of that. What I've included in the packet that I tried as best I could to separate without making this like a ream of paper is just to be just exemplars. If you at any point want more substantial information behind that, of course there are files that go behind each of these, but I just try to give you a sampling as we go through this. So that said, just to walk through quickly for each of the goals, and if that's the committee's pleasure, my thought would be we could just take goal 1. I'll just kind of highlight the high points of it. We can just talk about and see whether I'll tell you my take on where we are with it, and then maybe what the committee's feelings are, if that's agreeable to. That's perfect. Okay. So the first goal is the Milford Public Schools Educator Evaluation System. And I remember, Mr. Harrison, you suggested a number of breakdowns. I have 5 bulleted points here to talk about just some along-the-way benchmarks. And that's really to my benefit to show that we've made these sort of gains along the way. Among these, I described, we have the new educator evaluation tool that the state has rolled out. There's a model the state has rolled out, as I mentioned in prior presentations to the committee. Districts around the Commonwealth are still negotiating this. Race to the top districts, had we been one of those, we'd be obligated to have this in place. Milford, in many respects, is behaving as though it were a race to the top district because we've put this into place. Good, positive, both sides of the table negotiations with the association, with the administration to roll this out. There's kinks in it. There's things that we have to work through. We continue to do that. We're now ready to roll out phase 2 of this tool, which will be the last phase. Where it gets particularly complicated is around student data that links to teacher performance. That's going to be a hurdle for any district anywhere in the state. There are still districts that are still back figuring out what a walkthrough observation should look like or what that even means. We've moved past that years ago. So Milford's in a really good place in terms of what the state expects, but there's still work to be done. Anyway, that's the outline of this. The number of bullet steps, the staff training via webcast, that happened, and there's evidence by way of emails in the packet. Principal office hours and Q&A sessions. A lot of this was principals and I working together, in some cases with Teachers 21, to sort of figure this out as we go. It's not because we don't understand it in its entirety, but there's just so many moving parts to this. We want to make sure that everybody's, there's some leeway. If teachers need a couple extra days on a deadline, then we expect that the teachers will give the principals a couple extra days on a deadline for an observation. We're going to work through these together. The purpose of the office hours was just to get clarity. Many times, the principals would get, have clarifying questions that they would have to ask based on what the staff asked that they didn't have answers to. So this has been a very productive process for us as we go through. Superintendent office hours, I offered office hours myself as well with staff members district-wide. In-service training, which I did in October. I did highlight that for the committee in some prior meeting. And then finally, administrative training with Teachers 21. That's going on monthly, August through May. They still continue to work with, we have Patty Grenier. Patty works as a consultant for Teachers 21 and assists me both on the curriculum side of the equation and also on the educator evaluation system, which she has expertise in both. So all that said and the evidence submitted, I would say this goal, in my opinion, in my view, is on target. So I would just open up to the committee if you have questions or comments or need clarification on anything I've submitted or anything I can do around this topic, or if you think I need to readjust and refocus as I proceed to the second half of the school year.
So I appreciate you going through, and appreciate the bullet points and the timeframes for which each of these different activities has been executed. And I certainly know, I like the fact that you've executed all of them. My question would be, so as I'm kind of thinking forward to next spring, how do I, or this summer, how do I quantify how well they were done? So as I think about, is there feedback we can have from teachers as far as here's where the questions were? Yes, I got everything I needed out of this. Was there some sort of either a survey or something like that that we can kind of get from whether it's the teachers or the principals as we think about how this was rolled out, so that we can see, all right, so we did this with this webcast. Did it actually work? Like,
Sure.
Did it actually help the teachers? Did it help them, is there a way to be able to do that?
I suppose we could construct some sort of a survey, as you mentioned, to do something like that. There's going to be, additional steps that aren't listed here where, this seems to have, aside from the administrative training, it seems to have stopped in October, but really, as I just mentioned, there's like this phase 2 rollout and continuing discussions. I suppose the only potential hang-up with that might be a teacher's perception over maybe my perception about it. It comes down to whether they like it or not may be different than whether they got out of it what they expected or needed to get from it. So that could be, but maybe it's still worth asking the question. Did what I offered, or did the meetings that we had do what they purported to do? And so I could develop some sort of a survey monkey, and if that's something the committee wants to see, or the committee could develop the questions, then I could issue it.
Paul?
The only thing I was gonna say is, was asking too, is maybe a way to do that too, is to ask the teachers how they're incorporating what they learned in their curriculum or in their everyday teaching. I mean, if you go to a seminar, you're learning something, how do you carry that over to your job every day? So I mean, if that could improve the quality of teaching, I think that would be a good measurement, and that's that should be asked, and that's how they could answer.
Yeah, I think maybe it sounds like maybe some sort of a survey where teachers can give feedback. I mean, one measure of evidence of that is, are the teachers submitting, because this trickled down, is me using this tool with you, and the teachers using this tool, the principals with me, and the teachers with the principals. And so if all of that is in check, if goals are submitted and the feedback's given and lessons have objectives stated on the board and it meets the matrix, I suppose that's another measure. It's really, I guess, a little bit less subjective than me just telling you, yeah, I met the goal. But we can certainly do some sort of a baseline survey, I guess. It's a great question. I don't know how we measure that beyond saying, hey, we did it, we have proof that we did it, but did they get it? Yeah.
I think it goes a lot further than they do it. To me, the evaluations are designed to tell you what's working well, what isn't working well, and what are those problems, and what did you do to solve those problems. So I think it's kind of early, right? I mean, you're in the process of gathering that information, taking that in, and I'm assuming you're going to present to us and stuff like that. So I guess you've met that goal of getting that done, to this point. To me, the biggest thing for us to really look at is, what was identified in that process? How effective did you feel that process was? I know we're ahead of the curve, stuff like that. I think it'll be interesting to see the numbers when they come out.
Yeah, I mean, the real focus of this particular goal was the training and support, and
Right,
that's
to
to get it out, sort of rolled out. We know that we have to come back to the table and work out kinks in the first phase, what timeline-wise and whatever, and then the second phase, the student data collection.
So in the process of doing this, right? I mean, do you have anything that you could speak to regarding, like, there was a problem and we need to, as a committee, maybe rethink or reevaluate this piece, or in your opinion, did it run smoothly? That we don't have to go back and address anything?
No, I think the biggest challenge with this would be the timelines. You know, and by that I mean the DESC was late on giving out its information, so everything kind of backed up from that. Now, bear in mind, we didn't have to comply with the race to the top districts, the firm timelines, because we're not a race to the top district. We really have another year before this has to be in place, but we sort of held ourselves to that. If we started to push out timelines, it would now bump all the other timelines out and would create a problem for us. The other piece of this is we didn't have a good system. We don't still. We've now adopted one of being able to sort of coordinate all this information, the goals, the responses to the goals, and not to mention the teachers now having a completely different way about self-reflection. Has never been part of an evaluation tool in the past. It's been a summative kind of walk in. Here's what I saw. You're all done. Now it's much more benchmarking, much more dialoguing throughout the year. So I think that we are on track with it. I think it's just accepting the fact that this is very different and saying, but we are, relative to the timelines, we're on time with it, within a day or two. And I think it's just the learning curve of people saying, geez, this is different. And they're right. It's different for all of us.
And those issues that you had in the very beginning, because there was a delay, that's a one-year thing. It's not something that's going to impact
That's correct.
next year, right? Yeah.
That's exactly right. And now all those webcasts are now available. So if we hired a new staff member tomorrow, we now have the information to make immediately available to that staff member here. You need to become familiar with this. What was happening was the rollout from the state at the same time as the rollout in the district was really simultaneous. And the question was it really in sync with itself, or was one ahead of the other? Turns out the deadline that's published, or these benchmarks that were published, the DESE wasn't providing information that could allow you to make those deadlines. So we were kind of guessing along the way. You're right. So next year that should have alleviated itself. So I think there's no real reason to readjust this at this point, just to see, and I'll learn more when I meet now with the teachers, with the principals together in this collaborative. It's a subcommittee of the negotiating team. Say, okay, guys, let's roll up our sleeves. What's not working, and let's go back and fix that. So I think there'll be good perspective to get from the teachers on this.
Yeah, and the point needs to be made that this isn't, I mean, it was part of collaborative bargaining, but it's really, it's a mandate. We don't have the choice to change the process, to change what's asked to what is required. Those are things that, you know, those are done deals we have to comply with, so they are to the best of our ability within the confines of the contract and the teachers. What Milford's been very lucky with is that collaboration that the teachers put forth so early on.
Right.
That, you know, we're a work in progress as the state's coming through. But what we can ask you to bring back to us, we can't get any of the evaluation isn't, we
Right.
can't have any part of that. But we can know that
We can
the
redact
teachers were
names or
trained.
something. Yeah.
You know, no, but even that, I mean, you know, we can know that the teachers were trained on this evaluation to know we comply with the state, you know, and that you're working towards that goal.
We can modify. We've done some minor modifications. You have sort of three options. You can adopt it straight up from the state, adapt it, or you can create your own. Most districts, just because they don't have necessarily the good relationship, have just said, well, you know what, we're going to adopt the state's version, and we'll have to just fight with those teachers about it. We did an adaptation, largely an adoption, some areas adapted. There are other districts still that want to invent their own. There's not even an approval process that I'm even aware of in place yet, where you could submit it to somebody and they say, yeah, this looks good. So one of the reservations or fears that I have is that what happens if this works, everybody loves it, and DSE says, yeah, well, it's not quite what we want. We'll have to come back to the drawing board. But their focus right now is on these race to the top districts, this federal grant money that's funding it, and those districts have to make it work first. But I don't want to wait to see if they trip and fall. I want to make sure Milford is designing something so we're ahead of that implementation date. So we're a good year ahead of what the state is requiring us to do.
And it's a very effective evaluation tool.
Oh, it's
More so
terrific.
than in the past. It's incredibly comprehensive.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of accountability from administration down to the teachers. It's an excellent, excellent tool. It's for the benefit of everybody, but,
For the first time, to punctuate that, Christine, for the first time, teachers have goals that they're writing on paper that can be made accountable for.
and it's not punishment. It's not you're doing something wrong. It's a very creative and a working process. So okay, you know what, here's a deficiency, let's work to get it better. It's really remarkable. It's an excellent, excellent tool. Is it a lot of work? Absolutely. Principals have their hands full because they have to do this in their buildings. I mean, it's a tough job for a principal with a huge school, and even the smaller schools. But in the end, the fact that we're ahead, that we've started early, is only going to benefit the process in the long run. I think it's hard to evaluate, it's hard to evaluate some of these goals because there's not like an XYZ. It's really, really tricky. But this tool is a very effective, more so than any we've ever had in that way. So I think as it comes along, it's going to be hard. But you'll probably ask yourself that question as we hit every single one. Because there's so, I mean, in a year, it's hard to evaluate some of these things. Like, so we get surveys. How do we measure that? It's hard.
Yeah, but I'm open to any way you want to find empirically, try to make this as empirical as possible, and I'm on board. We'll try to find a way.
We all knew when this goal came through to us that you were going to be leaning heavily on your school principals to implement this process with the teachers, and I'm wondering, what have you noticed in the way that this information is being disseminated among the several school buildings? Are there buildings that seem to be picking it up more quickly? Are there differences in the way that some principals are presenting it over others that have been adopted from one school to another? What have you been doing to engender that cooperative attitude and work between the principals to make sure that we're presenting this in the most effective way?
Yeah, the continuity or consistency of the message from principals is really important to me. So when the curriculum committee meets each month, after we have just a general assembly of CTLs, principals, they're all at the same meeting. The CTLs then break into do their curriculum work. The principals remain behind, and in the exception of the last month, we've had discussion about this evaluation tool. What do we know? How are you dealing with that? What questions? Because every time we meet a different month, a different benchmark as we arrive at these for the first time, it's like, well, how do we deal with that? Oh, well, we have to collect evidence. What's that look like? How are you dealing with that? So this whole first time, we really work through it together. To answer the first part of your question, it seems that principals with larger staffs seem to come out of the gate a little stronger because they know they have to manage their time in a different way than the preschool would. If Lisa only has 16 staff, but now Nancy's got over 100 staff, that timeline still sticks. So if she's got to get into do 4 classrooms a day on average, whatever it may be, to make that happen. So that you do find some that are pushing a little bit, maybe harder or faster. I try to regulate that, have them pull back, say, be flexible, and so it's just a constant, really watching the flow of it, and keeping in tune with it. Principals and I are always in touch about this tool. We meet regularly on it. There's emails daily about this. Staff will ask questions. Principals will forward questions to me from staff. So there's constantly trying to work this through with the teachers on both ends. So we're always in check with it.
I think, Scott, to address one of your points, I think one way that we can evaluate, Bob, is if we can get a consistent message from the principals about the way the information is being presented to them. And I think another piece of it, and to Christine's point, we don't have data to compare it to, but we will in the future, is we can look to see if some of these goals that are coming from the teaching staff are the same goals being rebaked every single year. So is it the type of goal that it's okay to have every single year, or is it the type of goal that we should complete, move on, and then have a new goal moving forward? And I think that might be something that we as a committee should think about as trying to evaluate the way this process is working forward. I don't have the answer, but as I'm sitting here thinking about your question, I think that might be an avenue that we could look at.
I'll ask Patty Grenier, again from Teachers 21, who's working with a number of districts and around this tool, may have something the principals, superintendents are using in other districts as well, and how their school committees are holding them accountable to these kinds of goals or implementation. Maybe she has something as well, so I'll reach out to her.
Agree.
Anything else on this first one?
Any other member? I think we're okay.
Okay, very good. And again, I won't go through all the things that are behind it, but if you see that there's evidence, Bob, I'd like to see more of this or less of this or whatever, just like the teachers ask, as you come to these things for the first time, like, well, what should I include that I think is useful? But I thought, again, having samples of the PowerPoint that goes along with the benchmark target seemed to make sense to me. So if it's askew, let me know and I'll recalibrate. Okay, let me move to the next. So on goal number 2, is the Milford Public Schools Curriculum Committee. So I won't go through this again. I think the committee well knows. I mean, we've talked about it when the CTLs came, and we just had a presentation on this. This continues to be The goal here, I will meet monthly with the curriculum committee. Yes, you've seen, and I have the evidence in here again of those agendas. You know, Patrick, your wife is a member of that team.
She is.
I'm sure you get firsthand knowledge of how I do in those meetings.
I know almost as much as a teacher does about those meetings, as
Yeah.
a matter of fact.
And so in your assessment from third party, would you say that seems to be as it's projected to be or purported to be?
I honestly wish I could give you more constructive criticism on it. Everything that I've heard so far is that each of the CTLs is being pressed to do a lot of work, and they all feel that it's very productive. And so from my point of view, I'm very happy about that. So if they're pressed and they feel like they're getting the most out of their time and they're moving forward, I mean, we had the presentation last week where, I mean, that was just amazing to me. Yeah, and they continue to be.
I think it's exciting too, I really do.
This, by the way, is I am most proud of the work that we've done to empower Bob to work with this curriculum staff. I think this is the most important thing that I've done since I've been on this committee. And I think it's such tremendous progress, being able to map the curriculum from kindergarten through grade 12 is, I mean, that's unbelievable.
I'll give you a little kudos.
Yeah, no, don't worry. There'll be opportunities to take a shot later.
He'll do something later. And it'll be
No,
fun.
yeah, don't worry about that, yeah.
But, you know, when I looked at that goal, when you provided that to us, I'll be honest with you, I really sat back in my chair and said, he's really, I hope you're not biting off more than you can chew.
Yeah.
And you really, I think, when I think about how I can quantify and how I'm already starting to think about the evaluation when we do it this coming summer, that having the curriculum team leaders coming in and the presentation that they did really speaks volumes to not only the engagement that this team has, but how well you've taken on such a huge leadership piece and something that's, I mean, to Patrick's point, to try and do kindergarten to 12 and align curriculums and have everybody, you know, meeting at the door and shaking hands and passing off information is not a small undertaking at all. I think you've done a phenomenal job with it. I think you've done a great job of selecting a team that's truly engaged, does a phenomenal job, and tremendously talented. So kudos to you, kudos to the team. I can't wait to see what's next and what you guys come out with next, because I think you're doing a great job. So
Thanks,
at the risk of filling your head too
No,
far,
don't worry.
I want to give you certainly
It
kudos on
deflates
that.
fast. I'm really proud of this goal too, and thank you for that. And Kathy sees me on curriculum stuff. Running. I mean, so there's another source, you know. I don't even have a chance to talk to Kathy about curriculum. But anyway, not to thank you for your kind words, but not to beat that one any further. The evidence is obviously in there. I get myself to conferences around curriculum. I sit on, as you know, the Blackstone Valley Curriculum Consortium. The benefit that's been, by the way, for that one is that I'm the only superintendent that sits on these curriculum committees. And I have a dual role. So I'm the curriculum representative for Milford on these regional committees, and I also happen to be the superintendent representative for Milford on the superintendent's version of that. So I have the ability to control, to some extent, the regional curriculum agenda through the superintendents that sort of drive the bus in the region with curriculum people. So it's a great spot to be in with regard to that. So I'm excited about that. Not that I want to do this forever, you know, but it is, because, you know, it's just all the time, but it's been great for me
You know,
professionally.
we laugh, but honestly, people on this committee for 35 years have been talking about how do we get our hands around curriculum. And we're now going to have a person at the top who's in charge, who has his hands around curriculum, understands what he needs his staff to do, what he needs the people working for him to complete and execute. And it's something that we haven't had before, and very few school districts have. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're going to continue to see success.
I feel like for the first time, really, in the 6 years in the role, and I've talked about this before, but I really think it's coming to life now, is that when principals present their improvement plan or their budget, or you look at these goals and the strategic plan, that suddenly it all makes sense, like it all has come together. Like, there's no surprises anymore. It's not like there's this one rogue curriculum thing happening out there. It doesn't seem to make much sense. I mean, there's a couple of little things that we have to still correct. And I'll be the first to, Richmond is one example where we need to focus better and do better work in Richmond. We do. We're not there. Okay, so there's an admission of this. Quick I can deflate. Self-deflated. So we need to work on that. That's an area. But I think generally speaking, that we're starting to see now the budgets linked to the school improvement plans, linked to the district plan, teachers' goals through this new evaluation tool now link back and forth. My goals for the principals, everything speaks vertically up and down, district-wide. And that makes terrific sense when you go to put a budget together to say, yeah, this makes sense because it all links back to these pieces of the puzzle. Nothing is just arbitrary.
I mean, who in this room would have thought that that communication among members of a school building about their curriculum would lead to decreased supplies budgets, like it has in our school buildings, where now that they're collaborating, they know that they can share these materials, and so each teacher doesn't have to order all these things. I mean, just the little pieces that fall into place because of a project like this.
Yeah, it's getting the right people, together to talk about it. Okay, I want to move on to, the way they broke this out in your packets, that was the professional practice goal was the educator evaluation. The student learning was the curriculum committee. And then behind that's all the evidence. Then there's the district improvement goals. The first of which is data analysis. So here's a point, I put on target, I debated, be critical of myself, whether it should be off target. Because I mentioned in here meet weekly with our data specialists. I started to do that at the beginning of the year. I met with Pat Meehan weekly and found that you get to a certain point where you can only look at the data so many times where a weekly meeting becomes almost a waste of money. Because there's a cost to me consulting with Pat Meehan. What I've done instead is for example, Deb Small, the other day, through Data Warehouse, was trying to pull a specific kind of report for a math department meeting. It's just beautiful stuff, right? I get the email on this one. I line her up with Pat Meehan. Pat Meehan helps both Deb and me to see how to go about getting this report. I learn, Deb learns, Pat helps us. That, to me, seems like the more practical approach to using a consultant with respect to this. At the beginning of the year, to help me identify and get my way around Data Warehouse, that had applicability. Now I think a weekly meeting is almost just a waste of everybody's time. But having Pat available to me as I need her on a weekly basis makes sense. So I don't know how the committee wants to view this in terms of if it's Bob, are you meeting weekly? In terms of show me your calendar, show me where you meet with Pat Meehan. I'm not going to make the mark. So that's the upfront. So I can either readjust this goal to now reflect that, or I can just tell you what's going on, and you can consider that later in the year when you make the evaluation. But either way, it's the truth, and that's how I'm approaching it. But I'm happy to take feedback.
I was gonna say, whatever you feel as though is working for you, the way you just described it, is needed for when needed, and when the meeting will be more valuable to you or whoever you have with you on your team. I think, again, whatever you feel as though is working, because this is very important. It's something that, again, you and I talked about for years.
Right.
Getting the right, not only analysis, but interpretation of the data as well. And that could really open up a lot of avenues and a lot of things that we could see that we haven't seen before. So again, and this my opinion as one member is, whatever you feel is working the best for you and for your team.
I think the shift happens. I'm largely taking my cue from the curriculum committee. As CTLs are asking for things, looking for ways to dig into data, and they're doing that because they have to in order to align the goals and the curriculum together. The data is going to drive a lot of that work. As they ask for it, like my example with Deb Small, and I have the email with the evidence of that correlation between me and Pat Meehan. I did, and Pat's great. Pat's a data person. When she came out and I sort of gave her an opportunity, I think I might have mentioned this committee, the curriculum committee meeting days are crazy. I'm literally in 3 places just trying to keep track of what's going on in all the different, so you have all these pots on the stove. Pat and me and I had given her just a challenge to go and work with the staff and get them familiar with Data Warehouse. And Pat's not a teacher by trade, so she's a data person. And I think the teachers left there more confused than when they came in. And that, for me, was sort of the point of which I said, well, I think I need to keep Pat for me and not necessarily for the team, because Pat can help me, then I can translate what I've learned as an educator would, and not necessarily as a data person would. So that was a lesson learned. Pat's brilliant. She's great at what she does, but communicating that to staff who are teachers, and teachers getting that from a data person just didn't seem to work as well as I'd hoped.
Scott?
Yeah, I think this is, to some of the points that were made earlier. Part of this process, because it's the first time we're going through it, I'm not surprised that we're gonna run into these goals where we kind of wrote it in August, kind of throwing some stuff against the wall going, yeah, I think this one makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I think there needs to be that flexibility and fluidity to make the change, especially where there's a cost in it. Let me be the first one to say, and the second one, since Paul was the first one to say, let's not look for ways to spend money. If we can save money by not, you not meeting with her weekly if there's no value to it, use it as a resource when you need to use it. And if you need to adjust that goal, as one member, I would certainly be in support as well as of, make the adjustments to the goal as, whether it's you'll meet with Pat, as dictated when it's the next step in the process with the curriculum committee and kind of base it off of that, or however you need to do it as far as, I don't really like the idea of as needed. More of there needs to be something that sort of triggers that, I would guess. I would say is something I'd probably look for, but rather than as needed, because as needed sort of is like, it's like taking Advil when you have a headache,
Yeah, well, it made it hard to assess myself, because is it on target or is it not? It's not like, there's nothing really in between. It's pretty black and white here. But the point is taken, and as far as the what's underlined in this particular goal is I will post monthly curriculum reports on the district website, which highlight data analysis efforts revealed curriculum committee meetings. I do have some of that. It's really not very neatly present folders. A lot of emails and things back and forth. So I've created on the district website a curriculum tab, and then I'll just post these things to that tab as we go. I'm not sure anyone ever looks at it or cares, but it's there if people want it. And so otherwise, that part's there. But again, I'll revisit the language.
Where is that on the website?
It's on the district website. There's a curriculum committee, I look at the site, it's either on my page or there's a page by itself. Yeah, if you look on the website, there's a curriculum tab there. And so I have these reports these reports are not, they would be just the meeting agendas that are there, that should be there from, I said to Karen Healy. The reports here are not there because, like I said, they're all just a collection of emails that I get from various curriculum team leaders each week. As we do each curriculum committee meeting, I ask them to submit a summary of what the work they did around data, curriculum alignment, and so I have it, but some of it's all bulleted. I haven't had the time to sit and synthesize all of that into a kind of a neatly pressed and folded report to post on the website. But I could post all those emails and just the raw data in that area. I don't know if I'm going to look at it. So I don't know how useful it is.
Can't you post, I don't think it's necessary to post all those emails. I think you can have your meeting agenda and then another memorandum that summarizes the main accomplishments of the can
Yeah.
summarize. That might, and once you have that form, it's easy to plug what you get back after those meetings into that form. We don't need all the details.
No,
I appreciate them, but
Yeah, well, I don't know who would ever care to look at them. So one thought I had, I printed this up. This is what this curriculum committee affectionately knows as the grid, and this is the tracking mechanism that I use. So at each meeting, it kind of finds a home here, whether it's problem, action items, responsible persons, comments, solutions, status. I'm always kind of progress monitoring, and then this is for every element, for every subject is here. And then what I've done as part of the budget process, as I sat down with Kathy and we went through the budget meeting with principals, is I would look to see if there's a textbook need or a staffing need or a curriculum misalignment, whatever it may be. It's here. I can then see that it's addressed in the principal's budget or in the school improvement plan. So there's always that cross-referencing, but it's not so, I could easily just post this, which is effectively the summary of what happens in those meetings. So it's really the same thing, but it's not. Yeah, it's not a real clean, I put this in the goal, but it's not a real clean kind of document.
I'm just thinking of, if you need to do that, you put your agenda up there.
Yeah.
That might be enough,
That
or
should be
if you're gonna
enough.
summarize what happened at those meetings, there's gotta be,
I'll see what I can do to make. make some
2 or
sense
3
of it.
lines, bullet lines, that's it. Because as you get all that information
Yeah.
back, it's an easy task, not easy, it's an easy way for you to be like, okay, I got it. Like, what your bullets in your head are as you review that are all that can go in there. That is not something
Yeah,
that's neat,
It's for me.
yeah,
Yeah, it's the working tool.
not ours.
No, again, that's why, that's why I haven't posted it.
For us to see what, agenda item, it can be math, what about math was talked?
Right.
That can be a sentence. And then we feel like, okay, all right, everyday math in 5th grade
Except that
and
in
6th
6
grade.
hours, they have 3 pages of what they accomplished that day. So it's really hard to summarize, literally.
I'll have
I'll have to
a
show you
page
the-
and a highlighter, and I'll
Yeah,
show you.
I'll show you.
What
I'm
a
happy to get
committee might
feedback.
wanna see, what a committee might wanna
Absolutely.
see.
I will,
honestly.
yeah.
Because, I mean, I think it's really, that's a great tool to measure this goal, but
Yep.
I don't wanna see that.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, I don't think that's effective for us to see.
No,
We know you're working on that.
I don't
but
disagree.
I think it's interesting for us to have a pulse on what goes on there besides it, outside of the agenda.
Yeah. Sure. So I'll come up with a way to sort of synthesize that and get the highlights.
Shouldn't take too much time.
No. I'm not worried about so much the time of it. It's just, selecting which things, because they're
That's
all
right,
really
yeah.
important.
Right.
And they're all K-12,
Mhm.
so it gets bulky quick.
Yeah, oh, I bet.
So, okay, anything else on data analysis?
Yeah, I think, I personally think, and Paul and Scott both alluded to it, I think you have to redraft this goal. I think the goal, no one in it, it's not the fault of anyone in this room that the goal's not on point, because we thought this was going to work, and it just wasn't right. So rather than continue along with the goal that we'll have to explain, well, he didn't meet that goal, but here's the reasons why, and we're really actually very happy about it. Instead of having that discussion,
Yeah.
I'd much rather we redraft this goal, and we'll approve it at our next session, and then we can plug that in place of this.
Okay. Perfect. I really think that's the spirit of what we're trying to accomplish through this discussion. I think that's great, because it gives me a chance mid-cycle to adjust that, Okay, the second item on district improvement, standards-based report card, K4. I don't know, anyone have K4? You're in the K4. You've heard, people liked it. I've heard both, on both sides. Fourth grade would be particularly different than third grade, because now we're moving away from the letter grades to something different. And again, this is really pretty cut and dry in terms of timeline, and all of this is on target. This is, another separate 1 inch. And at some point for the evaluation for the summative, maybe worth you sitting with it and just looking at it to see the evidence, because I don't want to make a stack of it for these documents. But now it's this rollout. There's a lot of little kinks now. We're at the point of translations and trying to make sure we get the report cards effectively translated. And Maggie Chinese has been my lead person on this, helping me to sort of work with the principals. And every day there's emails going back and forth between principals, me, Maggie Chinese, and X2 about just working out the kinks in this tool. I imagine it'll get better by the second term at the elementary level.
I would say, just from a parent perspective, I would say it's fair. And I probably wouldn't put it much above fair. I think there's
Fair,
some,
in terms of the,
yeah, I would say.
I think it's much better than the last one.
Yeah, I'm sorry, compared to the last one, far better.
Yeah.
But I would say is overall, just taking it as an isolated evaluation of a student, I think it's fair. I don't know that it's not, I think it's better than it was. I don't still think, it's still not like, wow, this is fantastic and the best thing I've ever seen. I think there's still some areas for improvement on that, and it's, the
Okay.
more we can make it, it's a lot of data to try and wrap up into a 3-page
Oh, yeah.
document for.
We started this
for a
back in
third grader.
July.
And I get that,
you
and I
know.
know it's something that's continued work in progress. I'm glad that it's certainly not completed, but still, I know that it's a work in progress for you. It's a lot that comes home, and when you're trying to, for me, I have a student who's got some additional special needs as well, so I get like 6 or 7 pages of documents that come on top.
Well, see,
of it.
our-
So they don't always. What I will tell you is those didn't match in all cases either.
Yeah, that's a calibration issue that we continue to work out, and I would agree on that in terms of the rollout being fair. I think that the tool itself, I think, is really, my view of it, is actually really very good. We looked at a number of them and found some of the best models. They're all standards-based, links to the Common Core, and it tells you 12 things about your child in math instead of 2 or 3. But the calibration, and it's a great point. If you're a child with special needs, what's difficult about this is that a 3 is a 3 is a 3, or a 1 is a 1 is a 1. It's not scaled. So if you're a child, you're on an IEP for a reason, your report card is still going to indicate that you're, at the low end, performing end, because you're not making grade level progress. We count on the progress report as part of the IEP to be the supplemental narrative that accompanies that. If a teacher, and it may be first time rolling it out, I can't bring myself to give the student the lowest possible grade on the teachers struggle with that, right?
Oh, yeah.
So they're going to kind of go middle ground, but that's not a true reflection, to your point. I'm not sure if that's the case in point, but that's an
Maybe
example.
it is one of
that I'm
those,
familiar
as we continue to move through it, I think it's still, as you said, it's a work in progress. Is that
Yeah.
leaps and bounds over what we had? But, it's just as we continue to refine and educate and make sure that all parents are fully understanding, all right, so what's a 2?
Right.
What does that mean? Like, all right, what's a 1? What is a 3? What is it, I mean?
And we did do it with staff too. So
Right,
we-
oh, I know.
Yeah.
So it's, you know,
From room to room, second grade classroom to second grade classroom, and we did a parent training. I was part of the parent orientation, trying to explain this to parents. I think it's just that learning curve.
yeah.
But I think overall that it was long overdue to come out, and we can't minimize the impact here. This is the first time that the teachers had to, just to give you an illustration of the steps. There's the teachers now for the first time use X2 for their class rosters, and for student attendance in the morning. This is the first time they now had to go onto this X2 system and do all their grade reporting. So we had to do a training system for all the staff in the district, elementary staff in the district, as to how to use this, work through those kinks, people. Oh, X2, yeah. Next is the schedule. The
You can
schedule
actually go on, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, because
Not just their name anymore, now you have information.
We'll start to have the parent portal functionality
That's great.
as well at that level. It's terrific work.
Huge.
But I'll remind the committee of one extra step that kind of gets forgotten in there, one I remind myself of, is that we have in the contract agreement a little paragraph that talks about the Standing Technology Review Committee. If you negotiated the contract last time, right, so first of all, to get this committee to meet is an act of Congress. Number two is that every time we meet, I'm gonna bring this out, it's not gonna be popular. But it's really not intended to be a democracy, it's just about kind of a heads up to the teachers of here's what's coming, and what do you see from the teacher's perspective, what do you need to roll this out effectively? So there's an extra hurdle, so anytime you have an idea that involves technology, I've gotta go through this little hoop of fire. And then once I get past that, we can roll this out. So the timeline here is really, I had some self-doubts that this could happen, and in fact, I said to Kathy, I said, Kathy, be ready. Because remember, if you decide to go full force to an online report card that you print from the X2 system, and up until now, for the last, I don't know how many years, we had a carbon copy, 3-copy fold, which we didn't order. We didn't have a safety net, because we were gonna waste the money. Well, we needed the money from the report cards to offset the cost for this rollout. So that timeline was, I mean, we're talking about people, all of these white hairs. I earned these back in November.
I remember you talking about it.
Yeah.
And we had that
That
meeting,
was-
when we had the meeting in October of, yeah, so this is happening like tomorrow.
Within days,
Like-
we were within days of making those, the end of the semester and the rollout and the training line. But you know what? End of the story, on target.
Worked.
We're on target. And I don't have I have the report card, as far as evidence, I have the description, like the example, Woodland in the presentation, but I don't have the actual report card in here. But again, it's another example. If you see that you want something more to prove this out, just let me know that. Is there anything, questions, or anything off the mark on this one? The managing conflict, well, if it hasn't arrived here, I guess I've done that well. There's a lot of things that happen behind the behind the scenes. Again, just as a matter of not to go into that too deeply, but I did attend a seminar, which I thought was very helpful back in September. I set that as a goal for myself. I achieved that, and I've applied a lot of those strategies since then. And then also just growing, as I think Paul has mentioned a number of times, every year you gain practice in managing people, and every year you hopefully get a little better at it. And so you learn from some past mistakes, and yeah, my certificate of continuing education is in the back there. So that is my evidence. The coaches, yep, the coaches training, that's right. Thanks. And then the final part of this is the other goals. Communication with the Milford School Committee. This is an effort to try to make a weekly reach. I do try to do that. I know there's been some weeks that hasn't happened. But I do try to make, as you all know, to make an effort to make a phone call to you and to be available when you need me. And hopefully you're seeing that that's the case. Are you finding that that's
That's a
Well,
problem.
it is a
No,
problem.
here's the thing. When we were in contract negotiations, I got a call from you every single week on the way up to that. And then kind of went quiet on me. I got one this week. I don't know if this kind of started that.
well, now,
And I'm
wait a
not
minute.
saying we have
Well,
any communications.
Hold on, hold
But
on a
I'm
minute.
talking about the weekly update, the reach out to the, I liked it when you were going into the contract piece, and I did get one this week. But I'd have to say, out of all your goals, and luckily it's another goal.
Now, listen, I've seen you twice this, I've seen you twice this
Probably
week.
not your strength.
I've seen you twice this week. Want me to call you tomorrow again?
I'm just saying, Bob, I just,
I know, I guess.
All right,
I didn't get.
I would make a note to call Don.
I'm gonna give
Just saying, if you're
Dawn
gonna have
more love.
one, you know.
Sets an alarm and calls Don Quattrocchio every
I'm gonna
Friday
give
at
Dawn
2
6 a.m.
o'clock.
more
Yeah.
love. I got it right
Sure,
here.
contact him.
Schedule it if you want, but I'm not.
I'm
I
okay,
will.
you don't need to call
No,
me
I-
every week,
I
I'm
didn't-
good. I
But
chose
if
the
you,
schools.
but, you know, because everybody who's, you know, watching and who cares may think that the other way too, is that, have I been available to you though when you've needed me to
Yes.
respond? Okay.
I'm not. there's no-
Because that's important. I
No
don't want.
question there, Bob.
Okay.
It's nothing like, I can't find you. or
Okay,
anything,
good.
so.
I probably see you more than anybody in this committee. Maybe that's why I don't call you. I take that
That
for
might
granted.
be it,
Because
yeah.
I see you for safety and security meetings, I see you for, negotiation meetings. What else do I see you for? I don't know.
All the issues.
All the issues.
Maybe,
That might be it. Wait a minute, I've already managed the conflict. Come on. I will make
For
it.
those of you writing right now, you can.
Anybody else feel like Dawn? Anybody else? Do you feel enough love?
You should write down a note to call Don.
I did.
That's all I have to say.
All kidding aside, I will try to make a weekly set time,
Good.
okay?
All right, thank you.
How's Friday? I'm gonna call you tomorrow. All right.
As long as that meeting's over.
Yeah.
I had to
All right.
flip.
I know.
I know.
Well, I know.
Understood.
Here's what I will tell you though, from a communication perspective, I think it's something that's, I've certainly seen growth just from a personal perspective. I've certainly seen growth from when I first got on the committee back in May till, the present. I would say one good as you're kind of thinking about some proof points of your communication. I would think about the communication. I would, just something for you to make sure you document, and I know it will remain fresh for me, is as we went through the events of the tragedy that happened in Connecticut roughly a month ago, and the communication that you had through that, I would say is a huge feather in your cap as far as, Patrick, I think you said it best right after when we had our next meeting, which is when all of our minds were still reeling, you'd already taken action. And I wouldn't put that under conflict management. Your communication through that was tremendous. You had emails to us, you had communication to us, you scheduled a meeting on a Sunday. You'd already taken the necessary steps behind the scenes. And then you came, and quite frankly, you did exactly what I think every member of this committee talked about when we were going through goal setting of, go run the school district, and then come and communicate to us so that we're in the know. You don't need it, rather than asking our permission.
Right.
I think that was really a big step for you, because that's exactly what you did with that. You took the bull by the horns. You communicated to us and brought us in when you felt it was necessary and very appropriate. So, definitely something that, as you kind of think about, as I think about ways to kind of quantify how well you're doing on that, other than just as my phone ringing going through my call history, I would say that that's something to make sure you continue on with that type of a process.
I will do that.
Hopefully never having to deal with that particular
yeah.
issue again.
And to touch on that, during the evaluation process, every one of us asked you to kind of become that quarterback and steer the ship. So you're absolutely right. That was awesome, and did a great job. And we want to see more. So even to the earlier goal where you said, "Oh, weekly was too much," and you're like, "Oh, I'll admit that." None of us care about the process as much as what the final outcome is. And the fact that you're making those decisions and doing what's right for the district, nobody's ever going to question it. So that's the one thing you need to realize, that when you want to do something and it's good for the district, we're always going to be behind you.
And I honestly have felt that. I felt that with the, that point of just go out and lead it. Do what you need to do,
Yeah.
run this district, and that door opening for me, maybe just having to have heard that, and maybe it's a lesson learned, but I felt like this year that, for me professionally, was just a tremendous growth, and I was able to, whether it's around curriculum or crisis management or whatever it may be, I just did what I believed in my heart is the right thing to do for this district, and so far it seems to have worked well, and I will continue to do that. And then the final piece is the Woodlands Elementary School project. Continue to serve as an active member of the school building committee. This, as you know, is ongoing, and I think it's, I don't think any explanation further is
You're
needed on
meeting
this
that
one.
goal. I'm there at the meeting, so
You're there. The chairman is right there to evaluate. The only last piece that I'd like to do, just to take a couple of minutes very quickly, is just to talk about the strategic plan, which I included in there, and I'm just going to touch base on, because I want you to see that these are linked. This is somewhere in your packet. I can't remember where we included. It might be a separate addendum. Is it part of the packet at the end? Yeah. Okay. So we broke this down to be in. I broke this down to be in standards that relate to the same evaluation matrix that's used for me, that we use for teachers and so forth. That's that whole idea of the vertical. The first piece being accreditation. That's in this document, and you've been up to speed on that. You've heard from Lucy Jenkins, you've heard from the elementary principals, so I just want the committee to see that we've laid a timeline out here that we're really, because separate from what part and parcel to the goals that I've laid out, these are still separate things that are all happening in addition to the daily operations, and all this in 180 days. It's a pretty quickly moving operation in Milford. Curriculum committee, again, no need to, but it spells that out here, and then you'll see the way this is broken down, and I just for nothing more than just calling this to your attention as to how I view this. It breaks down year 1, year 2, what the certain kinds of goals are, and that's right on mark. Evaluation process and procedures, again, specific benchmarks there. Standard 2, the anti-bullying curriculum. I haven't given you much in the way of that in terms of, because it's not a goal, but there is a lot of information that I'll share in this before you do the summative that will show you what Milford is doing to be in compliance with the anti-bullying work. You've heard about PBIS and all these things that you've heard it probably 100 times. I just want you to know how it fits. The comprehensive fine and performing arts program, I'm on page 8 now. I'm going at light speed through this. Is the and a great example is what Mike was who's now back in the room. Mike was here earlier talking about the dance piece. Well, the dance was identified here as a goal. It's now made its way to life in the program of studies. Whether that now takes on a shape of enrollment or not, it's there, and I think that's evidence of it now being, a manifestation of this goal. The English language learner program development on page 9. At some point, we want to have Jen Lancaster come in and talk to the committee about what's happening in the world of ELL. It is very complicated. Our ELL numbers are tremendous. We have over 300 ELL students. This is students whose first language is not English. And we had additional over 100 students who are identified as FLEP, formerly limited English proficient, that are also entitled to services, sort of phase-out services. So you're over 400 students that are ELL that Jen is managing and doing a very good job at it. And then all the changes that have happened. Sorry.
Just a quick question. An ask that I would have on that is the sooner the better with having Jen in front of us. As we start to get into budget time, I think back to last year when I was sitting taking notes. A request from every single principal that came before the school committee last year was, I need another ELL teacher.
Yeah.
So the sooner we could get Jen in front of us, just so we can, as we start to prepare for that process, I think is going to be critical, so we have a true understanding of what that program entails, what are the needs of the program, especially as, we're already hearing from the governor's office and from the state that our monies are going to be tight this year. They're going to be extremely tight this year. So the faster we can get Jen in front of us, my own personal request would be the sooner the
Yeah,
better.
sure. See one of the next meeting, in fact, if you'd like. The assessments have changed. The certification for teachers has changed. We've done well in Milford to get Jen lined up with the state, and so Jen has become one of the state certified teachers. So instead of us now having to hire a state certified teacher, Jen does this for the district. She gets paid by the state to do it after hours. Staff are required to go. It's not on the clock necessarily. It could be after hours because it's like sort of a capstone of their own license recertification. And so Jen can speak to all that, but she's looking through these bullet points. She's on top of every one of these bullet points. So it's a nice transition from Ann Feldman to Jen. It would be worth, just to your point, to have Jen here, because when you won't see this necessarily in an improvement plan, but certainly in a budget, you're going to see it. And the first impression you're going to get of that is going to be February 2nd. You want to make sure that before that happens, you've heard about, so you have some sense of what these programs mean.
Can she give us distribution of those numbers you just said about
Yep.
400 students? I just want to know where they are.
Yep.
And statistics, please.
I'll just have to put together kind of a cheat sheet
Yeah,
of,
I want to know, if they come in limited English, how long they're in our programs. Like if they come in at kindergarten, those kind of, when do we expect them to become a FLES?
Yes.
Characterization, I think those are important.
yeah, I'll be happy to have Jen come in.
Great.
And I think to include both, in addition to this team with Kathy, to include Meg Belcito and Jen Lancaster, both in our budget meeting on February. To have them in the room, and if they're just sitting in the back, these questions come up, I don't wanna be left with, I'm not really sure, I need to check on that, I wanna be able to get the answer right then and there. So we know going into this full on, what the needs are and if there's a question about what a position means and how it translates, she can explain that to us. EL is probably one of the more complicated pieces next to special education. Special education obviously the biggest piece, but ELL is growing to be just as big for Milford in terms of programming under the law. Okay, moving on to the other piece, talking about celebrating our staff. The Partnership for Assessment Readiness for College and Careers, this PARC initiative. As I mentioned in a prior presentation, this is going to be intended to be replacing the MCAS. Eamon Cunningham, who Mike could speak to as well, is just an outstanding staff member at Milford High School. Father's a professor at Northeastern University. I had a chance to actually have some classes with him, in fact. Eamon is just as bright as they come. He was selected, and he's the only Massachusetts delegate on this PARC. He just came back from Washington, D.C. There are 6 people in the country who represent the interest, and Eamon's one of them. So at some point, we should get Eamon in here and have him talk about this, because he's not only is he an outstanding educator, and we're lucky to have him in our district. I mean, this guy is just, he's leading the country, and we have him in our back pocket here in Milford. I mean, it's unbelievable. He doesn't get better than that. I'm so proud of him.
For the public at large, he teaches at the high school?
He teaches right here at the high school.
He teaches what at the high school?
He teaches English,
He's a teacher.
AP language.
But we say these names, and I
I'm
like to
sorry,
make
yes.
sure that people know what they do. I mean,
Right.
oh, he's a, that's exciting.
He teaches the course and he's published the book that the students use.
Yeah.
It's exceptional.
He also is on not only is he on this PARC group, and his role in DC was to design AP literature questions for a national exam. That's his role, and he gives feedback with other people. He does the same thing in Massachusetts. He's also one of the MCAS question designers. So we have, and I think he's just one of those hidden gems that people don't hear much about him, and I want to bring his name right to the top.
Absolutely.
Because he's outstanding and he's ours. So I want to get him to the table, and so I'm really excited about that piece. That's why I didn't want to just say the strategic plan's in the packet. I really want to take a minute just to highlight that. The technology piece, you'll hear more about that as part of the budget. That's just a function of doing business. It's not so much an initiative. We get just doing business. Health and wellness, the policy subcommittee will be reviewing the revised health and wellness policy. They'll be coming up on Tuesday next week, and for a review.
I think that has to get changed, right?
Is that gonna get changed? The date?
Because, yeah.
Well, it's 6:30 and then.
Oh, no, we'll do it. We'll still touch it on in a half an hour, just a half an hour, unless you can't make that.
Do the best I can.
Okay, all right, we can work on that. At some future meeting, the policy
No,
subcommittee
that's
will be
fine. We'll
reviewing
meet
that,
next week.
the health and wellness piece, so we're on that.
Just bring it on.
A piece that I have not really had any time to delve into yet, although I'd like to, as a function of the district parent organization, which is coming up on the next page, is the Milford Public Schools Alumni Office. I think we're missing an opportunity in Milford. We do so much with getting to families and preparing them for orientation, coming into the schools, and it seems to me, and I'm not a Milford High School graduate, but you guys could speak to this better than I can. It seems like once you leave Milford High School, see you later, good luck. And I'd like to see more of it coming back to where they can give back, and there's the alum who want to give back, whether it's monetarily give back to the district, or even having a group of people, potential keynote speakers for senior nights, and just creating this. We're starting this with 8th grade last year by giving them an email address with their class year for the students, so that will then live on, so we can communicate with them. But I think we need to do some work around creating an alumni office to
And
really make that reach.
centralized.
Centralized alumni office. And so I want to make that a goal. It'd probably be a goal realistically at this point in the year for next year for me. But I really think that this is an effort that I want to take on. I'd like to look to the committee, because I'm not an alum. It would be good to have some perspective from members like yourselves, who graduated from Milford High School. But it's still on the radar. It's just we've not had time to get to that.
I mean, I think that an office like that, that's effective and is active, would pay other dividends beyond just sort of having an outlet to communicate about the school. We could network for some students that want to attend specific universities or colleges, or perhaps want to go into the business world and work for certain businesses, to have that connection. I know that I had that in college through LinkedIn with the college that I attended, and I'm wondering.
Guidance.
Yeah.
Director of guidance.
Yeah. So we can explore that. Again, this year we've had interim guidance, so we haven't been able to move on a couple initiatives, that being one of them. The other being, as you pointed out, Dawn, earlier, about this sort of the vocational, the Chapter 74 expansion. So there's a bucket of money out there under Chapter 74 that allows us money back to the district for vocational programs. We have to be somewhat cautious that we aren't creating programs that we can't sustain. Blackstone Valley Tech does a great job of offering a number of those programs for our students. Students who don't get into BVT, or if a program is not offered, rather if a student's not offered, a program's not offered by BVT, a student may be eligible for, say, if they're looking for equestrian science, to go to Norfolk Agricultural School at out-of-pocket expense. Okay, we're not going to be at a point where we're going to have equestrian science in Milford High School unless you have places to graze horses. That's not going to happen. Okay, so but there are areas.
Stop giving kids
Yeah, cut the skull on my pony. Save money on gas. Take my
Yes.
pony. Take my horse to work. We did talk about the hotel restaurant management piece. If in fact the casino comes to town, which you're seeing in the news, well, what a great opportunity to make it a teachable moment. We created a link. Who knows if it's coming? Well, let's build with it. And if not, but there's opportunities there. I think that other schools have not given our kids that we could, and we'll continue to look at that. We've been. Again, there's just not been time to get to that. There's a lot of other priorities, but it's very much on our radar. Mike and I talk about that often. The Milford Public Schools District Parent Organization, we're meeting next Tuesday. In fact, I have that simultaneously. I'll be next door here while there's negotiations going on here, and that group will be coming together, and that will really bring as a hub all of these groups, PTOs, booster organizations. I'll be speaking to them about the responsibilities they have with establishing federal tax ID numbers in case they happen to be using the town's ID number, which they can't be doing under the law, and explaining a lot of the details to them about how they can operate and how the steps they can take to establish themselves as a 501c3 organization that really has functionality, that has spending capacity. I'll be speaking to them about that. And then also just coordination. So whether it's fundraising or if it's calendars. So parents aren't have to be in 3 places and make choices. We can try to coordinate some of those events year long.
How can we audit which organizations might be using our tax ID number? I mean, I know we had sort of put a stop to much of that in the recent past because we knew it was happening, and we told them they really need to pick up their own ID numbers. But how do we audit who's using that number? It hasn't changed. People have it. It's out in the community. And I'm wondering if it's popping up on documents that we wouldn't necessarily know about unless we searched for it.
I think we've caught, there's nobody in this that's coming to this group that isn't aware and isn't already established their own federal ID number.
Right.
And Barbara and Ocean and I talk often actually about that to make sure that we're, and if she becomes aware of it, she calls me, and then I call the organization and say, here's the steps you need to take. And it's never done with any malintent. It's always done sort of,
Never said it was.
I didn't know, sort of thing, and we make sure we correct that. So I hope by speaking to this group, and then maybe the spokes that kind of come out of that, the people they know who may be doing support things on the side for those groups, we'll get the message out. That's why I think the value of this may or may not live on as a group forever. It may just be part of the year, and we'll feel it out as we have our first meeting, second meeting. We'll see if it's worth meeting.
I guess I was gonna ask the question, are you looking towards having a district PTO? You know,
No,
there's
no.
many districts that do that.
Yeah.
And they, oversee it, so you have one person in charge, and it's very effective. It's effective for fundraising, it's effective for a lot of different reasons, but I didn't know if this is just a venue to make everybody come together and meet, really.
Exactly right. It's what I actually, the reason why it's not started until now is because I went to every meeting personally to launch the concept and explain what I thought would do. But in order to get to all those meetings, when they happen simultaneously, I had to wait another month or 2 months to get there. So that question did come up. It's not intended to replace the autonomy of a PTO that it has to a school. They like to support their own school, but I did ask that that each PTO would elect someone from their board or even the general membership who's a regular attendee who could then report back to the PTO. So this becomes sort of another layer, but more sort of a 50,000 foot view layer of the district that they can report back out to the individual PTOs. I mean, perhaps down the road, this group may say, yes, this could become the new, but I'm not going into this with that idea.
Well, I think there's been discussion of having an elementary PTO. You can have your own unique identity while still being Brookside Memorial and Woodland all together.
Right.
And then, same with Stacy in Middle School East, there, it seems to me you could have one PTO for that level.
Especially.
One PTO for high school has a little bit of a different culture as usual, but, the elementary seems to make sense, but, I mean, maybe with the
Maybe the
hopefully
change
new
with the-
school, you'll have that opportunity, but, I mean, you get such, parent involvement at Memorial and Brookside and Shining Star, and then you get to Woodland and it drops a little, and then you get
Yeah.
Stacy and it drops a little, and then you get, how can you capture that enthusiasm middle years? And I think that there's something to be said.
And you're right, it's a lot of the same parents. I mean, I think I've
Oh,
seen.
absolutely.
I think I've seen Tara Spiegelman at every meeting.
Yeah, absolutely.
From kindergarten through, and she's right up, and she's just right now in middle school again, and she's on this district PTO.
Yes, right,
you know.
right. There are individuals
There's
like that.
dedicated parents who are just, every year, this is their commitment, and it's great for Milford.
Yeah.
You know, so we'll look at that, and I'll report back on it.
Curious.
And then I mentioned the vocational programming, and then the professional culture here about professional development, and that really has been right in tandem with curriculum. Tomorrow, it's the last comment I have tonight, tomorrow is going to be, I think is going to be, we believe it's going to be a stellar professional development day. We have great workshops, and it's all done by our own staff. It's our staff leading our staff, and I'm really proud of that, because we have people who've identified who excel in certain areas in technology or in leading curriculum development, and they're leading each other. And they've signed up, it's like a mini conference. It'll be here all through, actually, all the schools in the district. Teachers in the afternoon, for example, there's concurrent technology sessions, 2 different groups of sessions, and we came up with a register online. You could check a box and number of seats available. We had enough instructors to accommodate all the interest, so teachers will find it. And this is driven by the end of last year. I did a survey for staff around technology, but what do they want to know about technology to use it effectively? We built this entire day. I said, we, me, and Vinny, and a few others, put it together based on the data we had and put together, but all the teachers, and that's the technology side of that, but the front end of this, a number of people were involved with that in terms of, Patty Kelly with curriculum work, Jen Lancaster, Meg Belcito. Meg Belcito will have a nice orientation for her staff on how to write an effective IEP. Just long overdue stuff that gets people in the same room and says, just to the point we were talking about before, how do we coordinate IEPs with report cards? This will come up as part of this. So I'm really excited about tomorrow. If you have a chance, you want to stop in, please do. And that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other members have comments?
Sorry to go on so long.
No, that's okay. You're actually not done. We have to discuss
Oh, yeah.
the other piece, which is the remote participation
Yes.
in meetings. And actually, did you want to start with the summary?
Yeah, really, the Board of Selectmen issued correspondence to the school committee asking to basically get feedback and an opinion on whether or not the school committee has an interest in, because the way the law reads, that you have to all agree to go forward with this remote participation. You would still need a quorum, but if Dawn, for example, were traveling, or Scott were traveling, any of us was traveling, you could participate by telephone or by some video way. And they have certain rules. If it's by telephone, everybody's got to be able to hear. I'll just use it if you don't mind, Dawn. Everybody's got to be able to hear Dawn, and Dawn has to be able to hear everybody. If it's video, Dawn's got to be able to see everybody and back and forth. The remote member can still vote. There's no voting, restrictions, but you have to have a quorum at the table in order for that to happen. So as I understand it from the memo, the Board of Selectmen is just looking for a disposition from the school committee on whether or not they think this is a good idea and something they would actually want to use in the town for meetings.
There's a lot of regulatory pieces
Yep.
that go into making it work. I think, just personally, that it has a lot of value, and that if the other town committees think this makes sense, I think it makes sense for us to adopt it as well. I don't know that we need to be the hard chargers on this one and say, you need this for us, but if this is a tool that the other committees in town are interested in using, I certainly would support using it as well. It's going to put the burden on us to make sure they execute it properly, but it's just another small piece, and we can certainly handle it. So I wanted to float my opinion here.
I would certainly support that. I think it's another opportunity to think about, as the world continues to change, and I think it allows the flexibility for people that want to get involved and say, oh, you know what, but I travel for meetings and I may not be able to get to everything. Yeah, I think it opens up that opportunity as well, so. Absolutely.
Patrick,
Yes, sir.
Is there a maximum amount of time that a specific member could use that?
A number of,
In other words, let's say there's a member who just, let's say we have like 24 meetings a year, which we do, regular scheduled meetings, and these guys are gonna be out for, traveling for 20 of them.
yeah.
Did this?
Not that I read.
Okay.
Not that I read. So long as, again, as long as there's a quorum present at the meeting, and so long as technology works the way it's supposed to, and another million other little small pieces,
Okay.
as any law in the state works.
Right.
Then it's acceptable participation.
Good.
So,
Thank you.
I'm actually not a fan.
I think that it's much more productive that members get here and be in a room and face each other and talk about the issues. You know, it's great to have as a backup plan, but for the work that we do, I think this is the most effective forum. So to Paul's point that, you know, I don't know, it's a lot of regulation and, you know, everyone has to see that person, all the things you were speaking of, that for the time that I've been on here, people have made it a priority to get here and to make their schedule such. We don't meet every day. We don't meet every week. So that's just my opinion, but of course, if the committee favors otherwise. I just feel like this works for a
Right,
reason.
no,
when we
it
get
does, but-
everybody here to talk to each
But,
other.
but a way to address that concern is
Yeah.
we should, as a group, make our own standard where we could say, you know, each individual member could use this technique a maximum of 2 times a year. You know what I mean? You
Yes, yeah,
can't
that might
make it a
help.
habit,
That's-
you know?
I incline to
Right.
agree. I don't want it to be the
Not that
default
they
way
use
of
it.
using a meeting, yeah, I
Right.
agree.
This works so well when everyone's here. Or when we have when people are face to face, we
Right.
just discuss things better.
Yeah, I agree with that completely, but I think that there are exceptions where it might be.
I would say, I mean, my job is in travel. And, in fact, I came out of a meeting today that I'm being asked to go on the road, and I'm gonna be everywhere and anywhere, over the next several months, so, to have that, to me, would be nice. And, because I'm not trying to get away from my obligation here, I'm here for a reason, and I wanna participate, so, and if it's as simple as putting in a Polycom in here for the meeting, and I'm on conference calls, I live on conference calls, so to me, it's no big deal. And for meetings where, you know, there's not a vote or anything like that, and if I don't need to be there, that's fine, but, you know, obviously I wouldn't wanna miss, you know, a meeting if there was a vote required or something like that, if I had the opportunity to participate in it, so.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to be the board in this town that stopped the selectmen from,
No, I don't.
from pursuing that, but I absolutely agree. I mean, if, you know, we don't want it to be the default way of having a meeting, certainly. So I guess we could support it with the caveat that if it is adopted by the selectmen, then we might have to consider some rules that we apply so we can actually use it.
Just don't make it mandatory.
Hey, what's that?
Don't make it mandatory, like if I'm away, I have to.
Well, see, that's when you run into
Right.
some issues even with
Yeah.
that component, you know,
Yeah.
there are times you can't be here.
Right.
You know, and there are other reasons besides I don't have access to technology, you know, so I think that
But if I heard you correctly, Pat, it could just be a Polycom, a phone,
There's
right?
a remember, I mean, the rule.
there's all kinds of rules,
Yeah,
though.
there's like
Yeah.
5 pages of
Crazy.
rules of
Alright.
doing it. I mean, and again, it's not anything that we can't comply with.
Okay.
You know, it's not challenging, it's just there's a lot of steps to it. And, you know, I think that's why probably the Board of Selectmen want to poll the various committees, or one of the larger committees. Well, actually, there are some that are larger, but it doesn't matter. I would certainly support it in the condition that we might have to make rules to actually execute it.
That's fine.
I'll draft something and I'll get it out for the next meeting or, you know, to the committee to take a look at and see. And we'll go from there.
Motion from Dawn, second from Scott, support, all in favor, opposed, unanimous in favor of all present members, so the motion's gonna carry.
Mr. Chairman, I have nothing else this evening.
Okay. So the next item on the agenda is the report of the Assistant Superintendent for Business and Human Resources.
I have for the committee this evening 4 warrants. The first warrant is in the amount of $282,320.90.
Motion from Scott, second from Paul. All in favor of approving the motion? Opposed, unanimous in favor of all members present, the motion carries.
I also have a second warrant in the amount of $188,100.93.
Motion from Christine, second from Dawn. All in favor? Opposed, unanimous in favor of the present members, motion carries.
The third warrant is in the amount of $18,508.08.
Motion from Paul, second from Scott. All in favor of approving the warrant? Opposed, unanimous in favor, the motion carries.
And the last warrant is in the amount of $11,882.42.
Motion from Dawn, second from Christine to approve the warrant. All in favor? Opposed, unanimous in favor of all members present, the motion carries.
The committee does have a list of the latest hires from our previous school committee meeting. It is for your information only. No vote is required. We do have a jury duty request this evening for Kathleen Ballard at the Memorial School for jury duty.
Mike will be disappointed that he wasn't here.
I know, he does miss those jury duty.
Motion from Paul, second from Christine to approve jury duty for a Memorial School teacher. In favor, opposed, unanimous in favor of the attending members, motion carries.
We also have a professional development request for course reimbursement in the amount of $26,542.76.
Motion from Paul, second from Scott. All in favor, opposed, unanimous in favor, the motion carries, Madam President, members.
We do have a monthly update for the meeting, and I do want to inform the committee that we're moving into our new contract with our electrical bid that Mr. Salazi secured for the school department. He went out to bid, and that will be for the second half of the year at a 20% reduction, beginning in December, January. I also have a out-of-state field trip request. This is the annual May Washington DC trip for Middle School East, which does require a vote.
Motion from Christine, second from Dawn. All in favor of approving the trip to Washington DC, opposed, unanimous in favor, motion carries.
And we also have gifts.
So the first gift is from the Family Network Project. It's for service and supplies, total gift in the amount of $30. The second gift is from the Animi family.
That's what I would say too.
It's from the Animi family. It's for the Family Network gift for contracted service and supplies in the amount of $25. The third gift is from the Kempersall family. It's for contracted services and supplies for the Family Network in the amount of $25. And the fourth and final gift is from the LaFrance family. It's a Family Network gift. It's for contracted services and supplies in the amount of $25. I'd like to take all four gifts as a single motion. Motion from Scott, second from Paul, to accept these gifts. All in favor, opposed, unanimous in favor of members, the motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please send out our thanks to.
Yes, we will.
The next item on our agenda are our subcommittee updates. I did want to pass some information to the policy subcommittee. I got a note from an assistant principal and said that there are changes in the criminal courts for chins in the CRA, and our district attendance policy is no longer in alignment with what the courts require, so they're effectively having to keep two sets of records. So what we're calling a half-day absence, they won't recognize. So they have to backtrack and try and figure out what's happening with that student's attendance. Just started this year, and it's new, so I wanted to bring it to your attention. I'll send a summary email. I just got this the other day.
So a half-day absence is counted as a full day?
It's not counted as anything. They don't recognize it as anything, so
Okay.
they have to go back and find the time and say how long the student was away, and then argue over it. So it's not something that's been, it's making it more difficult for them.
Okay.
Okay?
Obviously, as we mentioned earlier, we're scheduled to meet on Tuesday. It's gonna be a full day on Tuesday. Bob, can you see if we can, I know we've already got an agenda already set up for that. Is it possible we could get that on the agenda, or at least we need to maybe schedule another meeting then, probably pretty quickly there afterwards?
On the chins piece? I can get it on an agenda. If we are meeting, in fact, on Tuesday, we have a half an hour at best, and there's the wellness policy, and there's the social media acceptable use policy already on the docket. It might be tough to get all three. We could do it, or we could reschedule it and do a longer meeting on a different day.
Are you sending those ahead of time, or we just?
Yeah, I'll get them out to you. I'm still working on some tweaks on the acceptable use policy.
What you'll get to us?
Yeah, you'll have a red line. The wellness policy should be fairly quick. That's already red line, ready to go. The acceptable use policy will be a bit more involved. I can certainly look into getting the chins is the law though, right? So it's not a policy that we have.
Right.
It's just it's how we apply the language of the law.
Correct.
So it may or may not have relevance to the policy group. We don't have a policy on chins that I'm aware of.
No,
No,
but we
but
have
we
a
have an
half-day
attendance
absence.
policy.
We have a half-day
Oh, I see what
absence
you're saying.
that
So we
they
have
don't
to-
recognize as being.
We have to
anything.
address that because we're creating more work for administrators.
Let me look into that. I'll get it on an agenda, though. It may not be able to be on the Tuesday.
Yeah, I would just say
agenda.
if it doesn't work out, and we've only got 30 minutes and it is gonna be a full day on Tuesday, we're gonna need to do another meeting probably pretty quickly then.
Okay,
Do you know Lauren Barron?
yeah. Yeah, and I had an email from Dawn Craig. I don't know if that's the system you're talking about, but Dawn seems to have some firsthand knowledge that must be dealing with this at
I'm
Stacy's
sure
school,
it's-
too.
I'm sure every assistant principal that has students
Yeah,
that end up
sure.
in the courts are dealing with this.
I'll look into that, too. I'll reach out. Okay.
The next item on our agenda is new business. Does any member bring new business?
Like joint safety and security, I just wonder.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I gave to Mike and to Dawn, I gave you a draft agenda for safety and security. See what you think. If you like it, I'll get that out. That's also for next Tuesday. Tuesday, popular day. Thank you.
Yeah, ask any member that brings new business. Does any member bring old business? We do have an executive session this evening. It is for two purposes. We will discuss a matter of collective bargaining, the discussion of which in public session would negatively impact the committee's ability to bargain. And then we also have a personnel matter, the discussion of which might violate the privacy interests of one of our employees. We will not be returning. We will need a roll call, each member agreeing by saying yes to participate in executive session. And yes, we will not be returning. Thank you very much.